When I wake up in the morning and the alarm gives out a warning, I don't think I'll ever make it on time. When I wake up in the morning and the alarm gives out a warning, I don't think I'll ever make it on time. By the time I grab my books and I give myself a look, I'm at the corner just in time to see the bus fly by. It's alright, 'cause I'm safe by the bell. If the teacher pops a test, I know I'm in a mess, and my dog ate all my homework last night. Riding low on my chair, she won't know that I'm there. If I can hand it in tomorrow, it'll be alright. It's alright, 'cause I'm safe by the bell. It's alright, 'cause I'm safe by the. It's alright, 'cause I'm safe by the. It's alright, 'cause I'm safe by the bell.
Session for Comm Week 2021. I have the absolute honor of introducing our speaker. Her name is Ricki Ellison, and I will tell you a little bit about her. First of all, I met Ricki Ellison now, gosh,
9 years ago?
10 years ago, something like that. And so Ricki got her start in the WSU Office of Admissions, her start at WSU. That's not true. She was an undergrad here first, so we're not going to get into all that. Her professional start at WSU was in 2012 here in the Office of Admissions. Since that time, she's grown substantially and has done all kinds of amazing things. She's gotten promotion after promotion, gotten degree after degree. She's working on her doctorate right now. Will be done here pretty shortly, I believe. I've been editing her dissertation, so
Hopefully. Hopefully.
Ricki is a shocker through and through. She played on the bowling team as an undergrad here and then went to the Olympics. She hates when I say that, but I like to brag on her because I think it's amazing. She was an Elliott School student as an undergrad, Elliott School student as a graduate student, now is getting her PhD in higher education. We don't have a PhD for Comm here in the Elliott School. That's probably the only reason that we lost her, I would think, to that.
Totally.
So after working in admissions, Ricki went on to be a clinical educator in the Department of Sport Management here on campus. She taught as a faculty and then also advised these sport management students and did an excellent job at that. And most recently, just as of October of this year, we lost her, but she's doing amazing things at the Wichita Regional Chamber. She is now the director of diversity, director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I'm so proud of her as a friend, as a peer, as a colleague. And she is here to share a little bit with you today about how she is championing diversity, equity, and inclusion in her current job, and also how she's been doing that for the past 10 years in some capacity from the Office of Admissions all the way up to where she's at now. So without further ado, Miss Ricki Ellison.
Yay. Well, thank you so much, Jessica. Yes, this has been a wild ride, I can tell you. We're going to just jump right into it. We're going to get into it. I want to leave some time for opportunities to ask any questions that you may have towards the end as well. But welcome to Comm Week. This was always one of my favorites when it came down to being an undergrad and graduate student in the Elliott School. Am I good with my mic?
Sorry, everyone. 1 second. I just want to make sure. Did that pop up for you? Okay, go for it. We'll fix it back here.
Got it. Sounds good. We love, I tell you what, in this age, we know about technical difficulties, most definitely, as we continue on. So when I first saw the theme for Comm Week, I was excited. Not only because I grew up in this generation, but this was something that I absolutely loved. Now, I think to myself, though, I am now to an age where themes are something that I actually remember the originals of, which is kind of interesting, but I'm going to roll with it. It's cool. It's totally fine. When I first started thinking about this presentation, I knew I wanted to talk about championing and what that looked like for diversity, equity, inclusion, because a lot of times we hear these buzzwords and we don't really get an opportunity to put true definition to them. So I wanted to give a couple of examples. But first, I want to talk a little bit about me so you know who's talking to you today, right? My name is Ricki Ellison. I am currently the Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce. Now, for the longest time, I had no clue what a Chamber of Commerce was, to be honest with you, for a very long time. But my role currently is to work with all of the businesses in the city of Wichita and talking about bringing them to the resources, connecting. So my job as a connector is to bring resources and opportunities to these businesses so that they can thrive in our community. So not only is it the ability to infuse my passion and my love for the city of Wichita, but it's also to be able to see that growth and that change that we want to see here in the city of Wichita. So like Jessica said, I am born and raised here in Wichita, Kansas. I'm a graduate, proud graduate of USC 259 Public Schools, Wichita South to be exact. I am a proud alum of Wichita State University. Again, like Jessica said, 2 times undergrad and master's degree from the Elliott School of Communication, which really gave me my foundation. Right? One thing I love about the Elliott School of Communication is the fact that no matter what your degree is in the Elliott School, you can go out to do an immaculate amount of things. And I'll talk a little bit about that because my trajectory is a little bit different than what you would expect. But that is what has helped me and be able to give you this presentation today and look at diversity, equity, and inclusion from a different lens. Also, like Jessica said, I am currently ABD, which is all but dissertation in my doctoral studies, which is hard. I tell you what, it's hard. But we are making it through. We are doing it. Hopefully, I'll be walking across that stage this upcoming May. I have a couple more drafts for Jessica to edit. Side note, always find a really good friend who can edit and is good at editing and also understands your voice because they come in times of need. So a little going on, continuing. So I am considered a boomerang because after I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I moved away for a job opportunity. I actually became a women's head bowling coach at Delaware State University. So I picked up and moved to Delaware, the East Coast, where I was incredibly unfamiliar. I had the opportunity to work at a HBCU, which is a historical Black college and university, where I got to lead a team. Now imagine right out of undergraduate, having that level of responsibility, assimilating into an entirely different culture that I was not born and raised of, not even really aware that it was that much different, but it was. But again, those experiences that I was able to learn while I was out there played a huge part. But coming back, I knew eventually my time would come back to Wichita as I loved this city so much. I had my daughter out on the East Coast and I wanted her to grow up with the same values in which I had the opportunity to grow up in. So we moved our family back to Wichita and I began working for Wichita State University. So I truly believe that experiences, learning about different perspectives, and continuing to be curious are the elements that we have to have, the characteristics that bring championing conversations. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I do want to give a small story about curiosity. You see this image at the very top above my head that you see there. So curiosity has always been something that I could never really put a phrase to. I never really knew how to explain it. I just knew I really wanted to know the whys. Why do people do what they do? Or why did you decide to turn on the shower before getting your towel? What's your purpose, right? And I could never really put a phrase to that until myself and one of my best friends graduated from our master's program. And we knew we wanted to do something to commemorate that achievement, because everyone in here, I want you to know, your bachelor's degree, your master's degree, any degree that you obtain, your associate's degree, those are all beautiful accomplishments. And I want you to hold tight onto that and celebrate those. And so we wanted to do something that was significant because we knew that was a major feat. Growing up, I never thought I would obtain a master's degree. It was never something that was on my mind. A bachelor's was, yes, my mom said, you will go get your 4-year degree and continue on, but I didn't even realize that there was additional opportunities for me out there. So again, we wanted to figure out a way that we could showcase this achievement. And so mind you, we decided to connect and we said, tattoos. I think tattoos are going to be the way we're going to do this because it's always going to give us a point of reference and it's forever on our body, shall we choose. And it's going to be a reminder. And so we wanted to connect with something that would speak to curiosity, that would speak to our passion and showcase our accomplishment. So of course, as communication grads, you would think we're geeking out about typography and symbolic meaning of words. And so we came across a typewriter stamp font, right? So think back in the day, typewriters only had so many stamps that they could utilize on a typewriter. And so sometimes they ended up having to combine punctuation. And so we came across this interrobang. So that's actually the image that you see in the purple square above my head on the screen. That is an interrobang. It was invented in 1962 by an ad man and gained little popularity, but eventually became an extinct punctuation mark. So a lot of folks probably have never seen it before actually used. But if you break down the words, right? So interro comes from the Latin word of interrogate. This was the question mark part, of course. And then the bang was an old word used in the design industry for an exclamation point. So we found this interrobang and said, this is exactly what we need to represent our curiosity and to constantly be reminded to move with passion and that curiosity. So this is when I was asked to speak about championing DEI and connecting to the theme of Comm Week, of course, my favorite show during this time frame came to mind immediately, and it was Saved by the Bell. I have literally watched every episode of Saved by the Bell at minimum 20 times each, and there's 86 different episodes. I've gone from the middle school days to the high school days to the college years to the summer internships, where I first learned about internships. I thought to myself, yeah, I want to go intern at a beach club. That would be fun here in Kansas, right? So Saved by the Bell instantly popped into my head, and I'm like, if there's a TV theme song that immediately brings me back to the early 90s, it was this theme song. When the alarm gets out in the morning, I'm not going to sing it for you because that gets a little too crazy, but I'm sure if you've heard it, definitely Google it, look it up, watch a couple of episodes. But that theme song resonates with me. Every week, I would sit down, if I could, and tune in. Because again, at that time, there was no streaming, no binge watching. I had to make time for my Saved by the Bell episodes. But I would tune in to see what Zach, Kelly, Slater, Screech, Jesse, and Lisa were doing. I would even venture to say that I considered these 6 people to be my TV friends. I could live vicariously through their middle school, high school, and college days. So then I started thinking to myself, well, Ricki, what did you learn from watching all of those different episodes? How did this media shape how you decided to move through this world of ours? Well, today we're going to talk about 4 of the characters and specifically how they've impacted my vantage point. So we're going to talk about Jesse Spano, we're going to talk about Lisa Turtle, AC Slater, and Screech Powers. As I reflected on these characters over the last week and putting this presentation together, I realized just how much I took my viewpoints of pop culture and society from these particular episodes. So let's just get right into it. So Jesse Spano, back in the day, was known as the high-achieving feminist academic. constantly fighting each episode for gender, inclusion, and equity. And of course, at that time, I had no clue what those terms even meant or what she was standing for. But what I did know was there was a term that I was unfamiliar with, and I just knew I had to get the answer to it, and that was feminist. I went to my mom and I asked her, "Hey, Mom, what is a feminist? I keep hearing them talk about this in my class." And if you can imagine, the look on her face at the time was like, "What do you know about being a feminist or what it is?" And I was like, "Well, apparently nothing," but they keep saying it, and they keep telling this one character that that's what she is. So it was from the time that Jessie endorsed Screech in being a part of the Miss Bayside pageant to requiring women be involved in the JROTC program, that this character introduced the women's struggle to me. What is the struggle that I could potentially be facing out in this world? And how was she tackling it as a high school student? Her friends were still her friends, but she was intentional about calling out inequities. Her friends were still her friends, even though they had to have hard conversations at the time. I remember, again, when I asked my mom about being a feminist, she took a second and she said, "Well, tell me the context in which you're asking." So she wanted to know about that episode and that we were talking about so that she could dive a little bit deeper into that explanation. And I just remember thinking back to myself, wow, this is pretty cool that they're talking about this in this episode here. I remember all the times that Jessie would call Slater a pig, and I had no clue what that meant. And this was at a sense of deepening my understanding of Jessie's intentionality in every single step that she was making. And so when I think about Jessie Spano, her championing of DEI was through her passion and intentional speak. Next up is Lisa Turtle. Now, this character was the one that I closely aligned to the most while watching Saved by the Bell. And you can imagine this is the African-American character, so maybe that's why. But that was only a bit of the piece why I resonated with Lisa. I know that that seems kind of surface, but as a Black character on this show, she showcased to me at a time where I felt different, that it was okay to surround yourself with different people. Her character was a well-off Black woman navigating middle and high school, and I connected with that. I saw each week a well-spoken Black girl that had friends of all type. She was the young depiction of what a strong Black woman could look like, and I could relate to that. Often in times of middle school, I would get picked on for what I would say is a proper speech. "Oh, you speak so proper," and I would be bullied for that. And I saw that as a negative thing. But then when I got to come home each week and release those tensions, release those pressures, and just sit down and watch a sitcom for pure enjoyment, and I was able to see someone who I felt reflected like me, it was impactful, to say the least. Lisa was championing DEI through representation in the spaces that she was in and her actions to redefine stereotypes. Next is AC Slater. Slater was stereotyped as a jock. And it really wasn't until the college years did his character actually tap into his Chicano heritage. It wasn't until an episode where Slater found a potential love interest who he went up to speak to and who began speaking Spanish back to him did he realize his lack of pride for his heritage. He then mentioned to the young lady that, "I don't speak Spanish." And she then began to educate him on his own heritage. This episode gave me a glimpse into Chicano, Hispanic, Mexican, and Latin communities. This was the opportunity to showcase how proud you can be of your heritage. Now you'll see on the screen, this was one of the most impactful quotes of that episode, and it resonated with me even then when I was watching it. As someone like Jessica said, who has represented the United States on a platform where you have USA on your back and you're going against and competing against other countries, where you have a deep pride for being an American, this dialogue back and forth really stood out to me. And so it went with Slater starting and saying, "I just think of myself as an American." And his love interest replied, "Knowing where you come from doesn't make you less of an American. It makes you more of a person." That was so impactful for me. Anytime I do an educational speak about diversity, equity, and inclusion, one of the first steps that I talk about is getting to know your personal heritage and finding pride behind it and then sharing it. If we just keep it inside, then we're not spreading that wealth of knowledge, right? So we need to understand who we are, where we come from, so that we can then share that heritage and that knowledge outward. A.C. Slater was championing DEI through personal education of self and sharing it. One of the things I love about our master's program is it's not just about what you learn inside the classroom in the Elliott School. It's about how you reflect on it, how you actually take that information and become a critical thinker, and how you now make decisions moving forward. Impactful. It's funny, small caveat here. One of the things that made a huge difference, I was in Dr. Lisa Parcell's class. And this was a master's class that I was like, oh, I don't know if I really want to take this. Like, I like Lisa, but I don't know about this topic. And it was our historical research class. Now, I like history, but I was like, I don't know how much I'm going to like or enjoy researching it. And the reason why I talk about this is because I was able to research and really find what I wanted to do my project on in this class. And it was looking at specifically African-American history in the state of Kansas and how rich it was. Things that I wasn't taught in my undergrad, or things that I wasn't taught in my high schools, to be proud of coming from Kansas, the state of Kansas, and how impactful that was. And so that opportunity is what really led me to understanding that heritage activism needs to be out there. You have to understand and be proud of who you are, where you come from, so that you can share that information outward. But that's what I would say Slater's championing DEI through his personal education of self and sharing it. And then lastly, Screech Powers. He was one of my favorites on the show just because of his ability to be comfortable with his own nerdiness. Right? He was the most comfortable to me of all of the different characters, because no matter how many times he got called geeky, he was pretty much the good-natured goofball. But again, and a lot of times he was the brunt of a lot of the jokes that were being had during the episodes. Many times you would even see his feelings hurt, but then of course by the end of the episode, the gang had rallied around him to make sure that he understood he was cared about. But the reason why I put Screech on here, and I absolutely loved Screech, was the amount of grace Screech showed. Thinking about being the brunt of a lot of jokes, thinking about how tired you can get of that, thinking about how tired you can get of Zach manipulating you over and over and over again. One of my favorite episodes is Screech's spaghetti sauce. And in this episode, he creates this sauce. Everybody loves it. They're tasting it. They're like, oh my goodness, it's amazing. And so then Zach, the main character, decides he wants to monetize it. And so he starts to sell it. Well, what they didn't know was that Betty Crocker was the originator of that recipe, and you can't sell someone else's recipe. So they got a cease and desist letter in high school, imagine you. I actually learned what a cease and desist order was from that episode. But Screech handled that with so much grace. He never pointed fingers or said, oh, you're so bad for doing that. Screech was championing DEI through his ability to show grace to others around him. And that's incredibly important as we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Oftentimes, diversity, equity, and inclusion can get a standpoint of othering and accusing or telling you what you're doing wrong. And we really have to change that narrative. It's about educating. It's about activism, okay? Championing. What is championing? You can see here on the screen, a champion is someone who believes in, supports, and fights for a cause. This person is a leader that supports DE&I efforts that benefit all. Words are powerful, and we know that in the communication field. So what are some of the different ways? And I talked about them. I wanted to recap the advocacy, perspective, right? Perspective through experiences. If you've never been to a quinceañera, I highly recommend going to one. Experience that. If you've never looked into what a Kwanzaa celebration looks like, do that. That's that curiosity piece that I talked about. Be curious. We have so much access to all the information that we could potentially ever want to get. Now, again, we have to be critical thinkers of that, right? Because who's monitoring that? Well, I don't know. I don't know who's monitoring that, right? But we want to be critical thinkers. But championing diversity looks different. Jessie was championing it through her intentional speak through passion, something that mattered to her. Lisa was championing it through representation in the spaces that she was in and the actions to redefine stereotypes. Slater was championing it through his personal education of himself and sharing that information. Because at the end of that episode, he did go back to the main character, Zach, and tell him all that he had learned about being a Chicano American. Screech was championing DEI through his grace, through his perspective, through his lens, right? So championing looks different. Now, the thing I loved about Saved by the Bell was that it did expose the viewers to social problems, right? So let's not forget about that. Poverty, homelessness, drug abuse. The show didn't always portray life as in rose-colored glasses. The characters lived lives that weren't always perfect. And I think that that was really cool. You can connect to that. My life isn't perfect. We don't want to go for a perfect life, right? We want to be moving through this life with intention. So sometimes you only get that one bell, right? You only get that one opportunity. And that's what I'm asking you here today. Take advantage of those opportunities when you see them. Go get them. As an advisor, I would always tell my students that you have to make your college experience your college experience. If there's something that you've always wanted to do or try, do it. If you want to study abroad, make sure that you do so that you can get that perspective or that experience. I had the opportunity to travel to the Philippines after I graduated with my master's degree. And it was a life-changing experience in the fact of just getting to see something different, seeing a different way of life. I came back a much humbler person. And 14 hours of sitting in the South Korean airport while I was waiting on my connecting flight also gives you some time to reflect. It is a beautiful airport. There's like a Louis Vuitton that you can walk in. It's absolutely amazing. So if you ever look it up, it was 14 hours of greatness, but it was still 14 hours. But make sure that you have these experiences. Talk to people who are not in your circle, right? To understand and asking those questions, not just what you do, but how do you see this differently? Or how would you have attacked this question, right? And then we listen. So remember that sometimes, again, you only get that one bell. And today I want you to decide how and what you will champion. So thank you so much for your time today. I greatly appreciate you all. And if you have any questions, let me know. But you have a certificate of completion, as you can see, for sitting through this presentation, as I always like to reward people for their actions as well. So thank you all so very much today.
my intro for her, and I forgot to tell you, she's one of our 2021 ones to watch honorees. Like, sorry, I forgot to say it.
It's okay.
I had
It's
to
okay.
come back up.
It's okay.
So, now, any questions? Anything you guys would like to ask?
I will tell you, Jessica was the crazy one who got the tattoo with me, if you were curious.
We have one. We had a whole discussion of where it should go, but we have them on the back of our arms, so they match. Here it is.
Yeah.
So what's the working title, or what's the title of your dissertation?
Oh my gosh, the working title. So I'm actually looking at the integration of diversity education into sport management accreditation specifically. So I want to get student perspectives on whether or not they would like to see it integrated into the curriculum or not. And there's a slew of questions like, do you think that faculty are prepared to be able to teach this? Should this be a requirement? And if it is a requirement, what does that mean? So we're narrowing. Yeah, lots of articles.
Ricki, I want at some point to come back to what your character would be if the fifth character on the slide was Ricki. So we've got four. We're going to figure out what the thing is. And
Yeah.
I want to push you to answer this in this way, which is to say, can you talk a little about what you're doing at the chamber and what resources that you're helping people connect to? If I think about what this means, the question is really about the kind of community, not that we have today, but that we're shaping for tomorrow.
Yes.
And so what does that look like for our community?
Yeah, so currently at the chamber, some of the things that I am doing right now is common language and common definitions. It's amazing when you pull out of the academic sector just how non-academic things are is the best way that I can put it. And so I'm really trying to build in that educational piece. So I'm spending quite a bit of time right now educating CEOs on diversity, equity, inclusion. What does that look like? What does that mean? We are trying to create a common definition for DE&I for the city of Wichita, because when we have visitors that come in, we want to showcase unity within our spaces. We're also looking at, again, bringing resources together. So anytime that we can bring, so what we do is like right now we have CEO roundtables. So we're bringing all CEOs together, not just one-on-one, so that they can talk about their struggles and connecting them. We also bring DEI task force. So that's been a big thing, is creating a task force to look at our organizations and see where we can be more equitable, where we can look at inclusivity. And so we're bringing those task force together to talk about how do you move from evaluation to action, right? Because that's been a really big holdup. A lot of times it's, okay, well, here's what we're doing. Oh, here's what we're doing. And we're meeting and we're meeting and we're meeting and we're meeting, but we haven't been able to see change, right? And so one of my big missions is to activate. How are we going to start activating our community to change these policies, to look at things differently? I do quite a bit of education on what does an inclusive workplace look like? I just recently did a presentation over an inclusive holiday and thinking about that, right? Inside of the workplace, we think, you know, we want to have it with the best intentions of, okay, we're going to have a holiday party, right? But what if I don't celebrate any holidays, right? Now, do I feel forced to attend? Or what if my coworker comes up and says, hey, we missed you at the holiday party. Why weren't you there? And maybe I don't feel comfortable enough saying that. What if I don't feel like taking off 2 weeks during this time frame because, you know, I actually like working because this is actually a really sad time for me. I don't have a lot of family, or I had family that passed away during this time. And so it reminds me of things that make me a little more sad. And so I actually would prefer to go to work in between Christmas and New Year's. Talking about flexible holidays. So maybe my holiday that I enjoy is celebrated in January, or it's celebrated in February, and I like to take a week off there. So things like that, bringing awareness to other lenses, other perspectives. I like to call it the diversity of consideration. Did you consider that mom who has to drop their child off at elementary school that doesn't start until 8:50, 9 o'clock in the morning, and can't sit in the latchkey line for 4 hours to sign up for latchkey that only has 75 spots when you made that mandate that they had to be there at work at 8 o'clock? You know, are you considering the people who you're working with and their perspectives, their lives, what they're bringing? I know there's been a big push of mental health, mental health awareness. And we talk about, okay, if you cough or you feel sick, don't bring that to the office. Well, what if you're having a really bad day? And being in the office is not going to help that. How do we balance that with, I still have to have somebody here 9 to 5, or I still need someone to answer the phones 8 to 5, because at the end of the day, these are businesses that have to make money, that need people to be there. And so my job is to balance that. What does that look like? Bring creative ideas, get people together so that we can solve those problems. And that's really where the conversation for DE&I comes from. We have to get together, not only to have the conversation and to educate, but to actually solve the problem.
Is your work this line going to involve also, since media are businesses, weaving in and getting buy-in from various media businesses in town?
Oh, yes, 100%.
I mean, with your background in media, it would almost be.
Yes. And honestly, that's one of the things that has helped me in the role. Is having the IMC creativity background, because I understand that nobody's going to get on board with something that's not cool at the end of the day, right? So if I need to make DE&I cool, I need to do it in a way that is low risk, that's low intrusion in getting into someone's personal space, but also educates them and gets them curious. And so 100%, I've come up with a couple of different things for this upcoming year, and don't share it with anybody. I know we're like live streaming, but there are some YouTube channels that I'm going to get ready to start from on behalf of the chamber. The first one's going to be DE I Don't Know. And I am so excited about it. It's one of the things, but again, this marketing, that's what I was talking about. When you get these comm degrees, I mean, you really can flex anywhere, and you really are a threat, honestly. And I really want you to be able to speak to that in your interviews whenever you're going out for these interviews, or if you have another interview coming up, because you're a gem. You understand things that folks don't necessarily understand. You understand the power of communication, the power of marketing, and how that can get your message across, and how that can get buy-in from people as well. And so with the YouTube channel, it's going to be the opportunity for our community to submit questions anonymously that they have about DE&I. And what we're going to do is we're going to answer them, but we're going to go around to different businesses here in the city of Wichita and talk about how they have implemented DE&I inside of their organizations, because so often we don't know, right? These companies are doing things, but they're not publicizing it as well. So this is our opportunity to do that and answer some DE&I questions.
Okay, set me up in that last answer. You talked a little bit about how a person who is applying for a job with undergrad will present themselves to an employer. What do you say for somebody who is getting a master's? What makes you different?
Your ability to critical think. I mean, 100%. I mean, that's right there on it. But it's also your ability to research, find different answers, find different perspectives. So a lot of times we can't or don't feel comfortable walking up to someone and asking them all of these intrusive questions to get to know the nitty-gritty. But what we can do, because we have a ton of resources here at the university, and the library is amazing, and I have learned that, you can research and find perspectives and find opinions and find suggestions. Case studies have been my best friend recently in work, right? So it's not just in the sense of, okay, I need to write this research paper, right? If you have a problem to solve within your company or your organization, they're probably not the first ones to have that problem or to try and answer it. And so you can utilize your research, your ability to research, and understand how to to decipher what is a good article, what's a peer-reviewed article, what's empirical research and data, so that you know how to really look into it and say, okay, no, this is a good article, and I can use what they've done, or I can use what they've researched to get some background knowledge behind it, and then I'll be better prepared to address the answer to my organization, company, or whomever you're reporting to in that area. And so being able to speak to that in the interview, saying, you know, I know how to research, I know how to find answers, and understanding that we don't know all of the answers. I am the first to say I am no expert, but what I can do is I can find you some information, I can answer some questions, and I can solve some problems.
I'll ask one. Have you done any research on how commonly people know what DE&I is as an acronym?
No, I haven't.
Go ahead.
I will. I will.
Reveal.
Yes.
that When Jessica sent me the description of your talk, I had to Google DE&I,
Yeah.
an acronym I was unfamiliar with. So just wondering.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's one of the things why we're trying to get this common language, right? It's so important. I will say, while I haven't found any research articles over it yet, which I definitely will, what I have taken in by way of my, what I like to call my, my tour, my tour in the city of Wichita, is that when you say the word diversity, let's take all the rest of it out. When you say just the word diversity, it means something completely different to every person that I speak to. And so if we are having a dialogue and we're not on the same page as to what diversity even looks like, where are we going? How are we we're not getting anywhere. Right? And so I think that that's that level of understanding.
I would say the same thing about the word inclusion.
What?
Mom of a kid with special needs.
Yep.
What one teacher considered inclusion is very different from what the teacher the next year might have.
Yes. 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 Exactly. And what that looks like. How does that play out? Right? Again, bringing the words to action, there's a big disconnect. And so that's what I'm working on. We have some playbooks that we're getting ready to start creating. We have some common language definitions to be able to put out there, because there's a ton of words for a full definition dictionary. I mean, so.
Is that because some people's definitions or the language that people have, I don't mean for you to out any particular company, but it strikes me that for some people that's perceived positively, and for some people it's perceived as a greater challenge than they might want to tackle. I'll say that as a plug.
Oh, yeah, it's not my job. Yes.
I wonder if part of the real challenge of your common language is to help people get out of their misconceptions and into a language that they can all get behind.
Yes, 100%, 100%. And understand how it will affect your bottom line, because it will. Yeah.
Is this a new position of the team?
It's not. It's been, so it was actually underneath community advancement. So it's been tagged, but the specific role has been about 3 years now. Mm-hmm.
I have to say, I've always considered the chamber to be a pretty conservative,
I know, right?
inflexible institution. And so hearing that they've hired you in this role was, yeah, really good news.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Glad you're there. Happy to hear what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I'll be tapping my communication folks, so.
Okay, I gotta keep asking questions. Have you seen Hot Coffee, the documentary?
No,
Okay, just go ahead.
I got it. I'm over here, like, I'm taking notes, okay? I'm taking notes. Hot coffee. Perfect. Thank you. Yay. Thank you all so much. I appreciate you.
We appreciate you.
Yay.